largest collection of research telescopes on any mountain in the world, can be found in southeastern Arizona, perched atop the highest peak in the Quinlan Mountains of the Tohono O'odham Reservation. Kitt Peak National Observatory has been a special place for astronomers and visitors from all over the world since it was founded a half a century ago. Amid the pinyon pines and silverleaf oaks covering this mountaintop, 23 optical telescopes and 2 radio telescopes scan skies nearly every day and night, making Kitt Peak the National Center for Ground-Based Astronomy in the United States. This tranquil landscape also continues to be the home of a wide variety of desert wildlife, which has shared the mountain peacefully with the metal and glass instruments of astronomical research since 1958. Kitt Peak National Observatory is funded primarily by the National Science Foundation. It is part of the National Optical Astronomy Observatory, or NOAO. NOAO also operates a similar observatory to Kitt Peak in South America, near La Serena, Chile, and it serves as a U.S. partner in the massive new Gemini North and South telescopes in Hawaii and Chile. Most of the telescopes on Kitt Peak are actually owned and operated by university groups or similar consortia. The 3 large telescopes on Kitt Peak that continue to be operated by NOAO are open to competitive access, meaning that every 6 months, committees of astronomers review proposals from their peers, and the very best proposals are awarded valuable telescope time. This helps ensure that the very latest ideas in astronomy can be explored and developed, weather permitting. The roots of Kitt Peak as a center of astronomical research date back to August 1953, when 35 astronomers gathered at Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, for a meeting sponsored by the fledgling National Science Foundation. The meeting's agenda focused on a proposal by 3 universities: the University of Arizona, Ohio State University, and Indiana University, to jointly build and operate a new telescope. At that time, research quality telescopes belonged to large private institutions, and astronomers who worked for smaller institutions with less prestigious programs did not have equal access to state-of-the-art equipment, or in some cases, any telescope at all. Obviously, a significant roadblock to their progress in astronomy. The panel recommended that the NSF support the construction of a national observatory, equipped with 36-inch and 80-inch stellar telescopes, and the world's largest solar telescope. But before an observatory could be built, a suitable location had to be found. Observatories have unique requirements, not the least of which are the atmospheric conditions around and above the site. Initially, the search group covered thousands of miles, identifying potential locations. After careful evaluation, the search was narrowed to 150 sites. Further stringent comparisons identified Hualapai Mountain near Kingman, Arizona, and Kitt Peak as the 2 finalists. Intense site testing now began to see which of the 2 would best match the exacting criteria demanded by the astronomical community. Concerns such as the amount of developable area and the amount of local foliage, proximity to a major university and support facilities, airflow and transparency of the sky were decided relatively quickly. Other less tangible measures called for specialized testing. A 16-inch telescope was installed on each site to test both sites for transparency and seeing, a term used by astronomers to describe the stability of the atmosphere. After 3 years of rigorous testing, Kitt Peak emerged as the best choice. Yet there was one more major step to take in the process of securing Kitt Peak as the site for the National Observatory. Kitt Peak is a part of the Tohono O'odham Reservation, the second largest Native American reservation in the country. Moreover, the mountain itself, called Olegam by the O'odhams, which translates to Mountain of Manzanita Wood, is a sacred place in tribal lore. It is considered to be the dwelling place of I'itoi, the elder brother spirit who taught the indigenous people to become self-sufficient in the desert. The Tohono O'odham, then known as the Papago tribe, feared that the proposed observatory would disturb the tranquility of the Olegam and ruin its natural beauty. It was not until Dr. Edwin Carpenter of the University of Arizona's Stewart Observatory invited the tribal council to the campus to view the night sky as astronomers view it, through a telescope, that the council members became convinced that the observatory could exist in harmony with their sacred mountain. permission was granted and a lease agreement was drafted and formalized by Congress. The lease granted 200 acres of the mountaintop for the observatory and an additional 2,200 acres as a buffer zone. In return, Aura paid for access rights and development costs, and it provides an annual rental fee to the nation, along with unfettered access to the site for tribal visits and rituals. Construction of the National Observatory could now begin. One earlier issue was water. There was no natural source of water within a reasonable distance of the summit. The solution? A 3-acre catch basin to collect the 18 inches of annual average rainfall, with the water processed on the mountaintop and stored in 2 tanks, each holding 500,000 gallons. 4 16-inch telescopes would be in place for research and testing on the mountain by 1964, but the first of the large telescopes installed at Kitt Peak was the number 1 36-inch, completed in March of 1960. That telescope was located on the spot now occupied by the WIN 3.5-meter telescope. It is operated today by SARA, the Southeastern Association for Research in Astronomy. The number 2 36-inch followed in 1966. Today, this telescope is operated by the WIN Consortium as well, a partnership of the Universities of Wisconsin, Indiana, Yale, and Noao. The 2.1-meter telescope, the second telescope installed at Kitt Peak, employed major advances in mirror-making techniques. Manufactured by Corning Glassworks, its 3,000-pound mirror was fabricated by a process called sagging, in which large chunks of Pyrex glass were placed in a mold, then heated to the melting point. As the glass melted, it filled the mold. Inside the mold were cores around which the glass flowed to create a honeycomb effect in the back of the mirror. The new process, though not flawless, was successful, and the 2.1-meter mirror was ready for an additional 15 months of grinding and polishing to smooth the glass surface to a tolerance of 4 millionths of an inch. It would take 2.5 years to complete this portion of the 70-ton telescope at a cost of $363,000. By September 1964, the telescope was ready to probe the night sky and reveal its wonders to visiting astronomers. Just a half year after the 2.1-meter mirror blank left Corning Glassworks for its trip to Tucson, ground was broken for the McMath Solar Telescope, which would be the world's largest solar telescope, a title it retains to this day. Awesome in both design and dimensions, the telescope required workers to build not just on the mountain, but into it as well. The vertical tower that supports the 3 sun-reflecting mirrors, or heliostats, rise 100 feet above ground level. The diagonal light path, aligned with the Earth's polar axis, spans 200 feet from the heliostat tower to the ground, and then continues another 300 feet below ground through the mountain's granite interior. The McMath Solar Telescope facility, operated by the National Solar Observatory, or NSO, was officially dedicated in November 1962 at a cost of nearly $4 million. On its 30th anniversary in 1992, the telescope was rededicated as the McMath-Pierce Telescope in honor of Dr. Keith Pierce, who is integral to the telescope's design and implementation. Just to the east of the McMath-Pierce Solar Telescope is a suite of telescopes called SOLAS, which stands for Synoptic Optical Long-Term Investigations of the Sun. SOLAS is a new facility for studying solar observations over a long time frame. SOLAS will provide unique observations of the sun on a continuing basis for several decades using state-of-the-art techniques. These long-term studies of the astronomical object, most important to humanity, will provide fundamental data to understand the solar activity cycle, sudden energy releases in the solar atmosphere, and solar irradiance changes and their relationship to global change. In March 1968, construction began on what many consider the crown jewel of Kitt Peak, the Noao 4-meter telescope. The first step in the actual construction of the facility was pouring the pier. Because of turbulence created by wind flow over the summit, the telescope needed to be raised considerably above ground level. A hollow pier, 92 feet tall and 37 feet in diameter, was designed and then constructed by a process involving a slip form. A circular form surrounded by scaffolding and cranes and placed at the bedrock was filled with concrete. As the concrete at the bottom of the form solidified, the form was raised and more concrete was poured into it. And so the process continued under blazing artificial light for 3 consecutive days and nights. When the monolithic pier stood firmly in place, its 18-inch thick walls reinforced with steel, workers began constructing the observatory around it. To avoid the possibility of any vibrations being transmitted to the telescope, the building and the pier are completely separated. The next phase of construction involved placing the hexadrones, the geometrical supports around the pier. The 96-foot-tall supports were fabricated in Phoenix, trucked to Tucson, and installed fully assembled at the rate of 1 per day. The building required 10 of these 35-ton units. A 500-ton dome was placed atop the building, designed to withstand winds of 120 miles per hour. The dome, which can rotate completely in less than 6 minutes, features a 27-foot wide shutter weighing 30,000 pounds that can be opened or closed in 2.5 minutes. With the building 18 stories tall, it was possible for designers to incorporate features not usually found in smaller observatories. Inside the structure, on floors below the telescope, are living quarters, complete with kitchen and showers, a lounge and recreation room, and typical for telescopes of the era, dark rooms for developing the glass plates used for photographing astronomical objects. But the heat generated by such activity migrated upward and caused problems at the telescope, so the idea of a self-contained observatory had to be abandoned. If the observatory for the 4-meter telescope seems imposing, the telescope is well suited to its surroundings. The mirror alone, fabricated with quartz glass, because of its lower susceptibility to thermal changes, weighs a staggering 16 tons. The contract for the mirror was awarded to General Electric in 1964. It was 1967 before the finished blank, costing $1,150,000, arrived in Tucson for grinding and polishing. That process would take an additional 3 years and require the designing of a special polishing machine to accommodate the large mirror. When the polishing was completed, the glass disc was covered with a coating of aluminum, just 1/1000th the thickness of a human hair. It is this thin coating of aluminum that reflects the light from distant astronomical objects. The 15 tons of glass serves only to support the aluminum. At the rear of the telescope is an enclosure called the Cassegrain cage. Inside the Cassegrain cage is where instruments are typically mounted. Mounting an instrument on a telescope is a time-consuming endeavor and can take up to a day to complete. Visiting scientists may bring their own instruments or use the instruments at Kitt Peak. Once the instrument is mounted, it is employed for the entire observing run. The moving parts of the 4-meter telescope weigh about 300 tons. The horseshoe that supports the telescope, similar to the one used on the Palomar telescope in California, turns on a thin film of oil, about 4/1000th of an inch thick. But despite their size, the mounting and telescope are so perfectly balanced that they are moved by a mere 1/2 horsepower electric motor. If the 4-meter represents the best of an earlier generation of technology, the WIN telescope represents the modern concept of telescope design. WIN is operated by a consortium of 4 institutions: the University of Wisconsin, Indiana University, Yale University, and the National Optical Astronomy Observatory. With a primary mirror diameter of 3.5 meters, the WIN telescope is only marginally smaller in aperture than the 4-meter telescope, yet the differences in size and function are remarkable. WIN stands as the prototype for a new generation of large telescopes, such as the 8-meter Gemini telescope in Hawaii and Chile. It employs a relatively thin mirror fabricated by a method called spin casting. In this process, borosilicate material is melted into a mold that spins at 7 revolutions per minute. The spinning causes the molted glass to flow up the sides of the mold and give the mirror its basic configuration. The 3.5-meter mirror weighs 4,000 pounds, about 1/7 the weight of the 4-meter mirror. WIN features other advances in telescope design as well. The control electronics are placed well away from the telescope to reduce the chance of heat migrating into the telescope's environment. And its dome incorporates doors in its side that are open during operation to improve airflow through the telescope chamber and better maintain thermal equilibrium with the ambient air. Even though some of the telescopes on Kitt Peak are aging, the instruments employed on those telescopes are modern and capable of the exacting scientific standards required for the latest astronomical research. Scientific support comes through a full array of support facilities, such as instrument labs, an optics lab, a vacuum chamber for resurfacing mirrors, maintenance facilities, and regular software updates. Support operations are conducted from Kitt Peak and the offices of Noao, located adjacent to the University of Arizona in Tucson. To obtain time on the telescopes at Kitt Peak, astronomers submit scientific proposals to the Telescope Allocation Committee, or TAC. This ever-changing committee meets twice yearly, in the spring and fall, and comprises astronomers who are considered experts in their areas of specialization to evaluate the proposals. A typical successful proposer to the TAC will receive from 3 to 7 nights on a telescope, depending on the science goals to be accomplished. In support of the scientists themselves, Kitt Peak offers a self-contained community at an elevation of 6,875 feet. The cafeteria remains accessible 24 hours a day. In the rear of the cafeteria is a lounge with reading material and a television. 4 dormitories are home to visiting astronomers and mountain staff, where they can sleep during the day after completing their night's work at the telescopes. Astronomers are not the only ones who are invited to Kitt Peak. Funding from the National Science Foundation carries a mandate to promote public understanding of science and support for the value of basic research. Therefore, Kitt Peak offers numerous public programs through its visitor center, as well as a gift shop featuring books, clothing, observing aids, and a widely known collection of Tohono O'odham baskets. For people who would like to experience the thrill of observing at the world's largest observatory, the Visitor Center offers the nightly observing programs. Designed to introduce the public to the wonders of the night sky, this program offers instruction on the use of star charts and binoculars, along with guided observing with one of the 2 public telescopes operated by knowledgeable and friendly staff. For those who seek an observing experience closer to that of the professional astronomers, the Visitor Center offers the Advanced Observing Program, in which participants are treated like visiting astronomers and given a dorm room, meals in the cafeteria, and a public telescope for the night to do visual observing, astrophotography, or CCD imaging. The participant plans the run and executes it with the assistance of a telescope operator, just as a professional astronomer would do. Kitt Peak continues to provide large research telescopes and instruments to the nation's astronomers in fulfillment of the mission for it defined in 1958, to provide leadership in the establishment and operation of premier ground-based astronomical research facilities, to promote public understanding and support of science, and to advance all aspects of U.S. ground-based astronomical research. Join us on this never-ending journey toward a better understanding of the universe by keeping an eye on our website at www.noao.edu. Please enjoy your visit to your National Observatory at Kitt Peak.